Hello, and welcome back to the More Money Podcast. This is episode 375 of the show. I'm your host, Jessica Morehouse. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Gabe Dunn. It was honestly a great, season opener, but I've got some amazing guests throughout this whole season, including my next guest, Eleanor Tucker, all the way from Scotland, my homeland, on my dad's side. I still haven't been there, and I fantasize about it all the time, but that's largely because I've just watched too much. What's that show? Oh man, now I'm already going to forget the show. You know the one I'm talking about. What's it called? Outlander. That's the one. I know Scotland's not like that anymore, and that's probably for the best. There's a lot of war and death, but that is how I see it. Everyone just in plaid and just a fantasy. But that's not at all what this episode is about. And Eleanor is actually British, but she lives in Scotland now with her family. And she's a former newspaper and magazine features writer and advertising creative. And she's worked in award-winning marketing agencies before becoming a writer for world-renowned media groups such as The Guardian and the BBC, commentating on health, society, sustainability, tech, and lifestyle. And she went on to co-found the first communications agency to focus on the sharing economy, which is the topic of the day. Also a trailblazing marketing agency specializing in two-sided P2P marketplaces. Now, she's really passionate about the potential of online platforms to democratize, empower communities, and help us live more sustainably, which, my gosh, we really need to ramp up, guys, because climate change is real. It is, and it's happening really fast. If you're from BC, you know those wildfires. They were not like that 10 or 20 years ago, let me tell you anyways. But the reason I discovered Eleanor was, well, honestly, sometimes I just go on Amazon and see what's going on in there. What kind of personal finance books should I check out and read? And I found her book, Thanks for Sharing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a book I'm obsessed with. And I absolutely loved her book, but I'm like, I hope that she's open to being on the podcast because I think this is a really important topic that we need to talk about. And we need to really talk about it practically too. What can we do as individuals? Because I know, obviously governments need to do more. We know that. But in the meantime, what can we as individuals do right now? And there's a lot we can do. She has lots of great suggestions. Suggestions not for people just in the UK, but in the US and Canada. She's got some great resources in her books. And so she's got some great resources in her book. So I'm so excited to have her on the show. You're going to absolutely love this episode. And without further ado, let's get to that interview. But before I get to that interview, I want to share a little bit more information about my online course that you may not even know about, but it's been around for almost 3 years, called Wealth Building Blueprint for Canadians. It's a course I built specifically with you Canadian listeners in mind who want to learn how to do passive investing like I've been talking about for years on the show. If you want to get rich slowly, invest for the long term, you don't want to day trade or dabble in something speculative like cryptocurrency or some hot stocks that you find online. You just want to make sure you can retire one day or, save enough for buying a home. And this course can help you. It is specifically about all the fundamentals you need to know about investing as a Canadian, but then I also show you how to build a strategic investment plan and then how to invest in your own portfolio by way of either using a robo-advisor or doing it on your own from scratch. There's lots of worksheets and calculators and spreadsheets that you will not find anywhere else on the internet, hence why I had to build them myself, but also get lifetime access as well as access to the private Facebook group, my monthly Q&A sessions for students, a private email you can contact me with, and you also get a private one-on-one session with me when you finish the course as well. There are so many benefits to the course, so I highly recommend going to jessicamorehouse.com/course to find more information and to apply. Again, that's jessicamorehouse.com/course to learn more and to apply. Welcome, Eleanor, to the More Money Podcast. I'm excited to have you on the show, especially I don't get too many guests from across the pond, so this is very exciting for me.
Thank you for having me, Jessica. It's such a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, well, I loved your book, so thank you so much for agreeing to be on. But when I read your book, the Thanks for Sharing, I really was excited to talk to you because I think the information you have in the book, I read it honestly in like a day. I thought it was such a great way to lay out this really important information about the sharing economy, and you have information about how to do this in the UK, but also in North America, which I think is really vital. But it's not really a topic that we spend too much time on, especially in the personal finance space, but it really should be more integrated. Like I was read your book, and I was thinking I was so much more, I think, creative when I was broke in my 20s. Like I would have, was trying a lot of these things just out of necessity. And I feel like a lot of us, as we maybe get older, our incomes increase, or we just get influenced by social media and what everyone else is doing, we kind of let these go to the wayside. So I'm so excited to have you on the show to talk about some of these exciting things. But before we kind of like really dive in, because we have got a lot to talk about, you want to tell me a little bit more about, what inspired you to write your book? Thanks for sharing. But also, what do you do now? Because I know this is part of your full-time work.
It is, yeah. It's quite unusual, I suppose, to sort of specialize in this area because it is still kind of quite an up-and-coming space, the sharing economy. And, most people have heard of certain types of platform, maybe home sharing or, the kind of Airbnb model a lot of people are familiar with. But what most people don't realize is there's lots of stuff going on in this space, and it's all quite exciting, but a lot of the companies are startups. So, for background, really, I began my career as a writer. I worked in advertising, and then I worked as a journalist and wrote for newspapers and magazines. And way back, I wrote an article about home sharing and home swapping. And this is before Airbnb was even a name. And I thought it was kind of fascinating idea that these platforms, websites could connect people in a virtual space, but then, that connection would flow over into real life, and it could be for the benefit of their finances, for the environment potentially. There seemed to be, a lot of good reasons for people to interact with other people and, share and swap and sell and rent between each other rather than just using a company. So to me, I'd already thought that, this seems a great idea, but it wasn't that, that was immediately then I was completely immersed in the sharing economy. There were sort of gradual steps towards it. But I now consult for these sharing economy businesses. And I work with the CBI, which is a big membership organization in the UK for companies and, help businesses within the UK, but also globally to find out about what else is going on in the sharing economy space and also help them with their, their brand and their marketing and things like that. And I work also with Marketplace Risk, which is a US organization which helps the marketplace businesses like, Airbnb is a classic example with their trust and safety and risk management as well. So do a lot of really interesting work globally. And then I suppose I reached the point where I thought, I would love to tell people about this, but do I tell the people I work with who kind of know about it already? Or maybe there's a space here to write a book that's for consumers, that's for regular people, and say, look, okay, there are these ways out there where you don't have to buy stuff necessarily, where you can share it or swap it, or if you own it already, you can rent it out. And I kind of wanted to just really spread the word about that and actually write something that was easy to read and just for regular people so that they could understand about this and see that it was something that I think is only going to go from strength to strength, hopefully.
Yeah. And I feel like this, especially with, younger people, Gen Z, millennials. Well, not that millennials are, I feel like every time I talk about that, I'm like, no, we're not as young as we used to be. We keep getting older as millennials. But I was just talking to my husband the other day, and he was talking to his stepdad. He was in his 70s. And he's like, I don't know why people aren't, they don't want to buy cars. They don't want to buy houses anymore. And it's like, it's a different world. Part of it is just affordability. But he was just like, he didn't understand why people would, rent cars or do like, car sharing programs, or why people refuse to buy homes. They prefer to rent. And I'm like, it's a different world now. And I think not only is it more affordable sometimes just to rent, or even, I know you talk about this in the book, but this is something that me and my husband have done, is you don't need to buy all the things that you need. For example, I know there was some stat that I thought was so interesting. Like everyone owns a drill, and like the amount of time that we use that drill in a lifetime is like a couple hours, it's like, why wouldn't we just share our tools or rent? There's lots of tool libraries or I know for us, we did some work a couple months ago to shave basically the bottoms of our doors because they weren't closing because we got new carpet that was a bit higher. And I'm like, I don't want to buy this saw and all these things. And we were able to rent them for the thing that we needed. I'm so glad we didn't spend hundreds of dollars buying these things. And I think changing that mindset, from past generations where it was all about ownership and having all the things that you need is a really great thing that, a lot of us are adopting just out of either necessity or because we don't want to, have just a house full of stuff that we don't use. Because I think we're seeing that with a lot of our parents or grandparents. Why do we have all this stuff that's just laying there?
It takes up space as well.
So
that's the other
space.
thing.
Oh my gosh. Well, this past summer I was, visiting my parents who live in Vancouver, and I was in their basement. I'm like, there's too much stuff here. So I actually helped them clear out. And it was kind of radical, this stuff that they were holding on to. I'm like, why do you still have this? Someone could use this. Someone might like this. You can donate it. You can sell this on a marketplace. It's just a different way of thinking. And it's actually kind of exciting.
And I think it's a generational shift as well. I find it really interesting. And, I explore it to a degree in my book. But I think that coming out of, maybe the sort of war era of last century, people didn't have very much. And when, the economies started to recover and, mass production and, all these things, I think there was a real sort of need and a desire, I think, within people to have a lot of things, and things were cheaper. And this kind of, became the norm throughout these generations. But I think now, and I see this, I've got a stepdaughter who is a sort of classic Gen X, and she's not interested in ownership at all. And to her, I think, it's that sort of Netflix generation, isn't it? It's like you stream it, you watch it, you move on. You don't, there's no sense of desire to, when I used to move house when I was younger, it was like, bagfuls of videos and DVDs and CDs and all this. It was like, I own these. And now it's like people want to tap into something, they want the experience, and then they're happy to move on. And I think it's one of the reasons that we're seeing the sharing economy gain popularity, because quite often these things are led by younger generation who are much more interested in trends. And I mean, fashion is a great example of that, where, people are, actually, really proud of the fact they're renting an outfit, or they are proud of the fact that something is thrifted and or that they've resold something. And whereas there might previously have been a stigma attached to that, now we're seeing this generation who are kind of like, yeah, it's rented. I'm having this brief affair with this outfit, this look, this bag, whatever it is, and then I'm going to move on. And I don't need that sense of ownership and that sort of garage full of stuff that we're talking about that we're only going to use occasionally, or if ever. Literally, sometimes people have got stuff that they have never and will never use. And you think about the carbon cost of producing some of these things. Like, I mean, I can't imagine, like, you mentioned a power drill there. I can't imagine what the carbon cost of production of something as complex as that, something as, electronic like that is. And yet for it to never be used, or for it only be used sort of minutes in its lifetime, it's, it feels excessive, doesn't it? It feels quite sad.
It does. I mean, I actually really liked that part of your book talking about the renting of things, especially like clothes, or you had an experience with like kind of a carpet cleaner. Like there's things that we can rent, especially from like individuals, because I think sometimes when we think about renting, we think of, renting it from a company. There's things that we can rent that we have no idea. And yeah, sometimes it's like, I have a stain on a carpet. I don't want to go and buy a whole expensive carpet cleaner. I just need to rent one for a day so I can get this stain out. We really need to kind of think outside the box and see what other people have. And I think that's such a great idea. But do you want to kind of share, because I know that's, a part that I'm like, I need to start doing that and look at some of these apps of renting like clothes. It's something that I think people only associate with really high-end clothing. That's not the case. You can get some like, just regular clothes for like an event. And, that's the other thing that I always hated is like going to an event. I have to buy an outfit that then I won't really want to wear too many times, especially if I'm photographed in it or something like that.
Exactly. And I think this idea that, has kind of been, I suppose, perpetuated by celebrities, this idea that, the horror of being seen in the same outfit twice has led kind of mere mortals like us to think that, we don't want to be wearing the same occasion outfit and then, as you say, be photographed in it. So, what's the solution there? And clothing rental is brilliant. And obviously there's a couple of different types of rental. The peer-to-peer rental that I try out in the book means genuinely borrowing from other people's wardrobes. We've got some really exciting apps emerging in the UK. One of them actually has reached the US. I would need to double check that it was available in Canada. I'm not sure it is as yet. It's called By Rotation, but I know that it's certainly reached the US. And this is this pure peer-to-peer where you are renting from other people. I mean, the downside of that is obviously is, you need to be renting from a wardrobe of somebody who is a similar size to you. So there isn't that range. But I think that rental for sort of, regular clothing as opposed to, as you say, sort of, really special occasion stuff is becoming more mainstream as well. I think the classic one in North America is Rent the Runway. And we've certainly got some big players in that space. And that's where the actual inventory, the clothing items are owned by the company and rented out, which I still think is certainly of value. It's easier on your pocket for certain. It's costs a lot less to rent something than it is to buy it. And then it's not going to sit in the wardrobe. So you are getting like multiple uses by different people out of the same item. So I think from that perspective, it's certainly, better when it comes to carbon as well. And I mean, I'm not entirely sure which brands maybe are in Canada. Maybe I've listed some in my book. I would need to actually double check. But certainly this idea that clothing rental is certainly not just for special occasions and certainly not anything to, feel ashamed of. It's almost like, if you're doing that, then, you're ahead of the curve rather than doing something that's, kind of embarrassing.
Yeah. But I mean, I was just thinking of stuff in my wardrobe. Like I bought a dress a year ago and it's a beautiful dress, but I wore it to a wedding and it's very wedding-esque, kind of looks like a bridesmaid dress. I'm like, I'm never going to wear this again. And what do I do? And so even thinking about, even if you don't want to rent someone else's wardrobe, maybe someone else will want to rent yours. And what a great way to expand and maybe, depending on the app, make a little bit of money.
Well, exactly. And I mean, in my book, I do very much explore this from the perspective of somebody that's renting other people's clothes, partly because I couldn't really find that many nice clothes of my own, as you will remember from reading it, to rent out. I think I had one success, but, there are people there with sort of, Carrie Bradshaw style wardrobes, and you just think, this is an incredible way of monetizing the assets that you already own, getting more use out of them. And as soon as we start to get more use out of things, then, the production of these things is limited because, these things, it's circular, isn't it? But, what a great earner for somebody to, you could sort of earn back the cost of the outfit itself. When you talk about the dress that you mentioned there, I mean, you could rent it out and really sort of make the money back on it. And I've even heard of people actually buying investment pieces and putting them on these apps to literally sort of reverse fund them. So it's the opposite of sort of credit on, paying for something on credit and paying it back. It's literally buying it and then making it earn its, its value back by renting it out. It's brilliant.
It's brilliant. Yeah, especially too, like I remember my sister also, she went to a wedding this summer and she was having the hardest time trying to find like a special occasion purse. She's like, I just need it for this wedding. I'm never going to use it again. And yeah, sadly, I did not think that, hey, maybe there's an app that you can rent something. She did end up borrowing it from somebody she knew. But if you have like a really nice selection of purses that are just in your closet you're not using, someone might need that purse for like a special occasion and you can make some money off it. Really, yeah, like you said, kind of reverse engineering things. Which is such
purses,
a good idea.
Or handbags as we call them, are perfect for rental because, of course, there isn't the sizing issue.
Yeah, exactly. Easy.
And also they're often very high value. So, they make a great rental item. And I've certainly done that for for special occasions, because it really does add something to an outfit as well to have that lovely bag, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I know, so, kind of shifting more to really sharing, because there's ways that you can share. There's no money passing hands. And the one thing I really liked, especially because it was at the beginning of the book, was the idea of food sharing. And for me, I got the idea because it's, there's some apps like you tried out where it's like you were giving away food that was close to its expiry, still fine and good, but you're not going to use it. And so it's going to be a waste if you keep it. You can exchange it with somebody, and then you can maybe use the app and get something that you need to make for your meal that evening, which I think is amazing. But I don't know if this is something you encountered, but I know there's like a hotel that you'd always get these like magic bags for, which I'm like, I need to find out if there's any hotels that do that. There's so many places that are, giving away food. They're like, hey, we have too much, or we don't need this anymore. Come grab it for either, a very small amount of money or for free. I'm like, one thing I've always wanted to do was really get into baking, but I hate the volume. Like, what am I going to do with all these baked goods? Sometimes friends don't want to eat all of it. Is this a way that I can like enjoy myself and then give it away and make someone's day or something like that?
That would be amazing. I wish you'd be nearer me if you start doing that, because I love home baking. And actually, I used to do the same. And I think particularly in the lockdowns, I used to bake with my children. And then it's like, what are we going to do with all these? So I would just take them around to neighbours and things. But certainly on these apps, that's a great use for them, that you can list items that you've made. I know that people do like to see maybe a prepackaged item, so that for things like allergies and sort of health and safety. So I know that Olio do sort of encourage people to show stuff that is packaged and maybe sort of show what the use by date is on that, so that people know what they're dealing with. But I do know that people have listed their own home baking as well. And so much food, I mean, it goes to waste, and it's just it's an awful thing to see. And I just feel terrible throwing out food. It really is the one thing that just makes me feel awful if something has gone past its sell by date and it just ends up having to go into the bin. I think, this could be a meal for somebody, this chicken or something. It's really horrendous. And these food sharing apps certainly do allow you to sort of see what you've got in your cupboard, see a use by date coming up, and you think to yourself, look, I'm not going to use this. Let me list it. And then it's, it ends up where it's meant to be in people's stomachs rather than in landfill, which is awful. And the ones where you can collect the food from, you mentioned hotels, cafes, restaurants, any sort of food related business, and they are subscribed to this app. The one we have here in Edinburgh is called Too Good To Go, and it allows people to collect these sort of surprise or magic bags usually at the end of a sort of day, and you don't know what's going to be in it, but it's there is a small payment. It's usually sort of £2 or £3, and you get all the sort of goodies in a bag, and it just means that they're not throwing them into a bin and they've gone to a good home, which is great. So yeah, my kids really enjoyed that one. My teenage son particularly, because if anyone listening has a teenage son, they'll know they're a sort of bottomless pit when it comes to such things.
Yeah, but it's one of those things, Bristol, where you don't think about it. And even just you giving the idea of look through your pantry, your cupboards to see, is there stuff that's been there for a while and it's getting close to the date where it's no longer going to be of use, and you're not going to use it. Try to find a better way, whether that's for example, doing a food sharing app, or even one thing that I've did some research on, because I actually did this after doing a girls trip where we bought a bunch of food and we always feel terrible because we don't eat all of it. We're like, what are we going to do? What a waste. We found that there's at least in Canada, there's lots of kind of community fridges. And so there's like either you can put dried goods, or there's a fridge and freezer. You could put fresh goods. And then whoever walks by and needs something, can do it. And I found there's one literally walking distance from my house, which is great because I was looking through my cupboards after reading your book. I'm like, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to use here. I don't want it to go to waste. What can I do? So there's, again, thinking outside the box. What can we do to eliminate food waste? Because like you said, it is a big, big problem.
And is that like the community fridges, like anyone can donate and anyone can
Yeah, it's
collect?
kind of like one of those like community libraries where there's just like, a little, thing on someone's house where it's like, take a book or put a book in there, and it's just about sharing. It's the exact same concept. So it's kind of, I think in general for people who are maybe low income or just, kind of food insecure, and it kind of takes away some of the stigma of like going to a food bank or something. It is private. There's, no one is seeing you do it. You can just go whenever you want, grab whatever is in there and bring it, to your home so you can make a meal, which I think is really cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm sure those exist, everywhere. They're popping up a lot more places. But it also reminds me of going back to the renting of things. And one thing, this is something that me and my husband have been thinking as his car is getting older, is you tried out renting someone else's car. And I know there are apps, like, was it like Turo or something like that? That's in North America. That's about, again, it is kind of like Airbnb of cars, which I don't love because I have some feelings about Airbnb these days. It's definitely shifted to what it used to be, into like people just using it to, become a landlord. But I thought it was a really cool idea to rent someone's car for when you need, what if you need a van for a day? Like, I know so many people are like, I'm, doing some moving, or I need to pick up this piece of furniture I bought and I don't necessarily want to go to a rental place. This is kind of an idea to rent someone's car. But what was your experience like? Because I know it wasn't perfect.
Well, yeah. And I think, throughout the book, I really tried to sort of tell the stories of what it was like for me to try these things and show that, it's not always going to go right for you. And I think that in a way, I wanted to give the perspective of just a kind of normal, busy mom who was trying out stuff and show the benefits, but show stuff that could go wrong as well. So you're absolutely right. I did borrow a car in my neighborhood, and it all went quite smoothly until I had to take it back, and it got dark by then, and I couldn't actually remember where I was meant to be taking it to. So I think that says more about me than anyone else. But no, I love the idea. I love this idea of car sharing in the community, peer-to-peer car sharing, because obviously car rental is something we're all super familiar with. And actually, this is often the case with the sharing economy. There are rental models in existence quite often, as you mentioned, for clothes rental. People are familiar with this sort of rental of a ball gown or something. But with cars, we all know about the sort of airport hire car things. But what the amazing thing about community, peer-to-peer car sharing in a community is that people who have cars that sit, in a driveway or on the pavement in a parking bay, unused for a lot of the week, what that means is that people who are only occasional car users could decide not to have a car at all and simply use one of these apps to access a neighbor's car whenever they need it. And then for that car owner, the person who has chosen to continue to own a car but to rent it out, it just means obviously that they're able to get an income from something, which it's increasingly expensive. I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but obviously the world over we've been affected by oil prices and the effect on petrol prices and rising things like car tax and insurance, cost of living, all these things. It's like making people question whether it makes sense to own a car at all. And of course, we're talking about carbon again. The carbon cost of producing a car is huge. And in fact, I think there's a stat in my book, and I'm not going to actually exactly remember the percentage, but I think it's around half of the carbon footprint of a car is in its production, not once it's on the road. So if we can start to enable there to be fewer cars produced and actually share the cars that we've got amongst us. This is way different from, the kind of car rental that we might be familiar with for when we go on holiday or something like that, your sort of Hertz car hire. This is about having these assets in the community and just really making use of them together. And this is that term collaborative consumption that I mentioned in the book. It's about collaborating to consume, not just consuming our own things and being that sort of territorial mindset that we've had for so many years.
No, absolutely. And, sometimes you just need a car for a specific purpose. And that's why, me and my husband were just talking literally the other day about what are we going to do when our car, like it's an older car and it's you know, it's been around and it's doing well, but you know, what are we going to do when the time is to make a decision about getting a replacement? And he's like, you know what, I think we should try to live without a car and try out some of these things of maybe renting someone else's car, or, you know, taking an Uber. Sometimes that makes the most sense if you just need to go to point A to point B, but there's so many options now. And I know one thing that I've been seeing a lot on, you know, social media and online is the cost of cars is so much more expensive now than it was to purchase. Lots of younger people, especially, who think that they need a car. And again, it depends on where you live. I live in the city of Toronto. It's very easy to get around in terms of like, there's, you know, lots of cars. You know, if I want to rent a neighbor's car, that's, you know, there's a lot of neighbors with cars just sitting on the street, or there's, you know, transit. So if you live in something, you know, a small town or a suburb, may or may not be, you know, possible. But, you know, people are spending like $1,000 a month on car payments. And, you know, with our, you know, rising cost of living, like that is a good chunk of change that can mean that you're no longer paying your debts or you have nothing left to save. And so is there an alternative that, you know, is not only better for the environment, but also for, you know, your wallet?
Yeah. And the flip side of it is keep the car and rent it out to people. And I've heard of people, you know, using the likes of Turo and I'm not sure if the other ones are available in Canada. We've got a few sort of emerging car sharing platforms here. And I know that in certain European countries, it's, you know, really quite normalized. But people can make that sort of, you know, $1,000 back just from renting it out and cover the cost that way again. So I always think it's important to remember that in the sharing economy, somebody has to own. And, you know, I've had this discussion before where people have sort of said, you know, so you mean nobody owns? It's like, well, somebody has to.
Yeah.
So it's a case of whether you're the sharer or the sharee, I suppose. And, you know, like we talked about with people's, you know, your wardrobe or something. Some people have got, you know, a better car or a bigger wardrobe, and they can be the ones that, you know, kind of monetize these assets. They're making money, but for the actual person that's doing the borrowing, they are tapping into something for a lot less as well. So, you know, the economical benefits are on both sides of the equation, and the environmental benefits are on both sides too. So that's one of the things that's really exciting about the sharing economy.
Absolutely. And I know there's, you know, one part of your book, you also talk about, you know, space sharing. And like we kind of touched on at the beginning of this episode, Airbnb was, you know, one of the kind of the first ones about, you know, sharing. And it's funny, I think a lot of people forget where it started. It was really about, you know, having an air mattress in your home and renting that out to someone because there was a conference that there was no hotels that you can rent. And now it's kind of just become something very different than what it originally was. And it reminded me too, back in the day, there used to be an app, and I had some friends that did a lot of traveling, and it was called couch surfing, and it was global, and you could literally, it was free. So it was very much about the sharing of, you know, my space to give you, you know, help as you're, you know, backpacking around Europe or what have you. And, you know, there's still a lot of things like that out there. I know you tried out, you know, renting, or you stayed at someone's house when, you know, the family member you had in London wasn't able to give you some space. And also there's the time the office. I'm curious. I wanted to ask you about when you did some work. There was like a hotel, and you can rent like a desk or whatever. Was it actually like, were you not supposed to be there, or was it?
Yeah, that was another. There's a theme. Things go wrong.
Yeah,
I sort of got swept along and ended up in a meeting I shouldn't have done. But I didn't want to put people off using that app, but it happened, and it was kind of funny. So I thought I would share it in the book. But I do use this app. It's actually a kind of new emerging app that's really only in a couple of UK cities, but I'm hoping this will catch on. And it's called Swerve, and the idea is that you can rent a space to work during the day when hotel or cafe or restaurant has that space, has that downtime. So of course, you know, the sharing economy isn't just about sort of person to person. It can be about sort of business to consumer as well. And what happens here is that these maybe businesses with quieter times during the day can allow people to come and work there. And what that does is obviously it makes them look busier. It sort of helps people find out about them, you know, a bit of sort of brand awareness. You know, they might get some extra sales from coffees and things like that. And just generally, it sort of keeps that hospitality industry moving along and helps people to sort of get out of the house as well, which I think after lockdowns, I think a lot of us are fed up with working from home. So that's a great example of that kind of space sharing using something, an underutilized space. And there are some other examples. I mean, I'm not sure which ones are available in Canada, but when I started looking into different kinds of space sharing, storage is one certainly where you can. I think there's one called. I'm just trying to think if it's called Spacer, but I'd need to check what was available in the Americas. But there is certainly a couple in the UK where you can, if you've got things that you want to store, like power drills. No, I'm joking. But, if you have equipment of some sort and you maybe live in the centre of a city and you don't have that huge amount of storage, that maybe somebody nearby has a bigger basement or a loft or a cellar or something, an area that they can rent out. And again, it's that sort of empowerment, really. You've got a space that you want to rent out and you become a sort of almost like a micro entrepreneur then, making money from that. And then for the person who needs the storage space, it means that maybe they don't need to travel out of town to some big sort of lock up, or they can store stuff locally. So there's that. There's also when I looked into it, you can rent creative spaces for work, or maybe I don't know, anything from music practice to maybe you're not getting enough inspiration at home if you're painting, or you want to rent a space to do that in. So literally renting spaces in people's homes that maybe are more creative for you, but also gardens. I didn't realize that you can rent, if you wanted to have a garden party or an event or something, or even actually use their garden to grow vegetables if you don't have that space yourself. There's a startup called Allot Me, where you can actually rent out part of your garden as a sort of vegetable patch for people to come and use. So honestly, it's such an inventive space, and there are so many brilliant ideas coming through. And none of these are mainstream at the moment, but I think they often tap into a need. And I think with urban living particularly, I think space is an important one, and we don't often have a lot of it. And I think that it has to be shared around, so it makes it perfect for the sharing economy.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of the sharing of the garden, because even in my backyard, I do not have a green thumb, but I have this one space. It's an old sandbox that I know can be converted into like a little vegetable garden, but I do not have the time or the inclination to figure out how to do that. I'm like, I would love to be able to give someone who maybe lives in an apartment but really wants to garden this space so I can enjoy it looking beautiful when it's grown, and they can have that space to have a garden. But I think the other thing that we haven't really touched on, but this is, I think, part of the reason why I really like the sharing economy, especially as we've gotten out of lockdowns and COVID and we really disconnected. Like, we felt more online, but we were disconnected on an actual human level. This is a great way to meet new people, to get to know people in your own community, because I feel like gotten really far away from that. And, part of that is meeting people doing these apps, whether it's like sharing food or space or what have you. But also, I know you tried a bunch of apps that were all about skill sharing, which I think is really cool. And I've heard a bunch of about these before, but, some of them, again, are like, oh, pay a fee and then I'll teach you a skill. I love the idea more that, no, there's no, again, payment involved. You just get credits for if, you have to help people, and then you can, enjoy someone else's service. You want to kind of share a little bit more about your experience with that? I loved that idea.
It's amazing. And actually, so many people have asked me about this element of the book. And I did actually, I wasn't 100% sure if it was even going to include it, because it's not a physical thing. And sometimes it's hard to kind of categorize it. But I loved it so much, I did include it. And the idea, and I talk about in the book how it's not a particularly new concept. The idea is that it's a skills exchange, but what happens is that an hour of your time doing the thing that you're good at is automatically the same value as an hour of somebody else's, and with their skill. So you, on a platform, and there's a couple of them coming through in the UK. I'd love to know if there was anything similar coming through in Canada. But the beauty of the technology is that it allows you to swap your skills, but you don't always have to swap directly with the other person. So, for example, as you know, because I've written a book, that I'm a writer, so I can help people, as I do in the book, with writing. So maybe their website or something. So I list my skill as copywriting or writing, and an hour of my time is worth an hour of somebody else's. So when I want to trade that, it could be that somebody wants to use an hour of me and then I get an hour's credit, but I can then use that for a different skill, which makes it brilliant because you don't always just have to engage with that one person. And I cash an hour in then for something else. And in the book, I do a couple of things, but one of them was I got somebody to help me out with my house plants because I keep killing them, and I'm getting slightly better. But she was brilliant, and that hour was so valuable. You just think, well, if I was to sort of, I don't know, hire a professional gardener, and how would you even do that? But just to be able to get that advice and that, just that know-how from somebody. But it could be something much more practical than that, like bookkeeping or something to do with, I don't know, social media, or even sort of like, it's fixing something in your house. So all these types of things you can just swap, and it's always an hour, so it's completely cashless. And the potential for that, I mean, in communities is huge, and you do see it happening in an informal way, and certainly around sort of community centres. And I know that people have done that, but I think technology could really power this and make it much more mainstream for everyone to use. And it's brilliant. And I think for older people as well, who've got a bunch of skills that maybe younger people don't have anymore. I mean, things like crafting and, mending and all these sorts of things that a lot of us want to get back into. It's like, how brilliant to be able to sort of tap into the older generation. But also you touched on this idea of sort of, loneliness and exclusion. And I think that, ideas like this, where we come together and actually, it's a meeting of minds. And I think it's so good for everyone involved. And I would love to see these sorts of platform really thrive in the future. Have you heard of anything in Canada like that?
I haven't, but I'll I haven't done that much research, so I'm hopeful something exists, because I'm already thinking of, like, I mean, obviously, like, I have got some skills, but there's so many things that I like to learn, just hobbies. And I know you met up with like a wine expert. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love that. I love wine and I know nothing about it. I would love an hour of someone's time who's really into wine, who can tell me what to choose and what to know.
Yeah, because imagine how much it would cost to sort of like hire a kind of wine consultant
or something like that.
Yeah. There is a worldwide organisation called time banking, which I do talk about in the book. I mean, it's not sort of sharing economy in the sense that, there's no app for it, I don't think, and I'm actually not sure how it works on a kind of, on a actual functional level. I don't know, but I know it's an organisation. I know it's based around this idea of cashless skills exchange based around an hour of time, hence the name. So anyone listening and wants to sort of find out more about skill sharing, I know time banking would probably be certainly a place to start. But I just think it could be a fantastic, it could be a revolution if everyone got into this. And that's the thing about the sharing economy. It's like, I just want more and more people to get involved, because the more people get involved, the more stuff there is out there. And there's more dresses to hire. There's more food for, going around that's not ending up in landfill. There's more, gardens to plant vegetables in and things like that. And I just think it would kind of make the world a better place.
I agree. I mean, I think that's what I found so inspiring about your book, is just seeing what the world, or the future of the world could be if we all came from a place more of less of what can I buy, because I see everyone buying all these stuff, and what can I share, or what can I rent, or, what's a different way of doing things that will benefit me and others and, the environment and the world at large. I think it's just a really important thing to integrate into our lives, especially as that, honestly, like, we really do need to make some big changes, because as and I live in Canada, and there's so many wildfires and climate change, and things are happening rapidly, and so we need to do what we can. Obviously, I think some things that on a higher level need to change, but what are some things that are within our control that we can do to make a really good positive impact? And there's so many things out there, and really appreciate again that you share lots of your personal experiences trying out things. And again, you have some great lists in your book. But even if this inspires someone to be like, is there like a food sharing, situation in my community? That could be a great thing, especially if you're like a busy mom or something like that and trying to figure out, oh gosh, I need this XYZ. And there might be someone literally just down the street from you that has exactly what you need. And, again, too, the community aspect, I think we really need to figure out ways to reconnect with one another, because it's it's the best part of life, is getting to know other people and learning from them. It makes you feel like, there's a point to all of this,
Yeah, and save some money into the equation. And I think that, the sharing economy feels like it's sort of timely for several reasons, because as you say, we've all got concerns about the planet, but it's hard to make changes when you are worrying about money at the same time. And I think the good thing about the sharing economy is that, you get that connection to people, you get you're doing something that's maybe helping the planet, but also a big incentive to get involved is saving or making money from it as well. So it just feels like, gosh, how could you not get involved with it in the current climate?
What's the downside? I mean, I'd say the only downside thing to keep in mind is what you're doing is you're effectively probably trading some of your time. But, when people complain, I just don't have the time, believe me, I complain about that all the time. And if you actually looked at the amount of hours you spend on something that's not really a good use of your time, there's time if you want it to be, if you want some time, there's always some time somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I would think if I could trade the time I'd sort of spend, I don't know, looking at Instagram or something, it could always be better spent, couldn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it was such a pleasure having you on the show. I encourage everyone to grab a copy of your book. Thanks for sharing. Where can people, find more information about you or the book? Where can we direct people?
Well, I am on Instagram, which is a good place to find me. And the book itself is, it's available worldwide. I do have a website, which is Eleanor Tucker, all one word, .co.uk, which if anybody wants to find out about some of the work that I do. That I hope people enjoy the book. And it's got a very British setting, but I've had some really great feedback from people in America and Canada about it. So I hope that everyone enjoys it as much as you did. So thank you so much, Jessica.
You're welcome. And that was episode 375 with my guest, Eleanor Tucker. You can find more information about her at eleanortucker.co.uk. And if you want to grab a copy of her book, one really easy link that gives you a lot of different options is geni.us. That's GENI.us/thanks for sharing. But again, I found it on Amazon, but I'm sure it's at, all of our different bookstores. So make sure to check it out. And I will be including links in the show notes for this episode, jessicamorehouse.com/375. And yes, I am also giving away a copy of her book, Thanks for Sharing. If you want to find more information about that, I will share it after I share a special message with you. So do not go away. Do you want to figure out where your money is going? Do you want to organize your finances once and for all? Do you want to feel less anxious about your money? Well, I have a great tool for you. My collection of budget spreadsheets, which you can find at jessicamorehouse.com/shop. These new and improved budget spreadsheets have helped thousands of people over the years, and these are honestly the budget spreadsheets that me and my husband still use today. They come in Google Sheets and Excel. They also come with a comprehensive video tutorial to show you exactly how it works, and they're very easy to use. Not only that, I've got versions for pretty much any scenario. So if you're an employee, I've got a budget spreadsheet for that. If you are self-employed, I've got a budget spreadsheet for that. If you're in a couple and one of you is an employee and one of you is self-employed, I've got a budget spreadsheet for that. I've got 7 different budget spreadsheets for any kind of situation. So no matter what's going on in your life and your income, I've got a budget spreadsheet for you. So if you want to take action and see some progress with your finances, this is one really easy step that you can take right after listening to this episode. Just go to jessicamorehouse.com/shop, find the right budget spreadsheet for you, and then start making some moves that future you will be really, really thankful for. So if you want to enter to win a copy of Eleanor's book, Thanks for Sharing, or even enter to win a copy of Gabe Dunn's book, who I had on last week, Bad with Money, which is a great book as well, make sure to go to jessicamorehouse.com/contest. Both of them will be on there. And I update it every single week whenever I have a guest on the show who's an author. And honestly, I feel like almost everyone I have on the podcast is an author. Oh my gosh. Everyone has a book. No, one person doesn't. Okay. I just like authors, and I like supporting authors because also I'm an author I'm coming up, I'll talk about that in a second. But anyways, yeah. So I will be updating it as new authors come on the show. I will add their book. I'm always going to give away books. I've been doing this for years, and I like to support these authors by actually buying their books. I don't just ask them for free. Sometimes I do get free books, but I usually just keep those. And then I buy a copy of their book and then give it away to you. So jessicamorehouse.com/contest is where you can find more information about that. Now, since it is October officially, this means, guys, that I'm officially 70% done my book. I only have 3 more chapters, which is very exciting. I'm getting, the hump. I'm over the hump. Is that the saying? I'm over the hump. And so, but also it's like, oh shoot, not only is time just flying by, but that also means like the holidays are around the corner. Like I can feel it. I can feel it. I'm not ready for it. I'm not. Summer. It was just summer. And now it's, the time just goes by too quickly. I don't like it. Mm-mm. But, yeah, so that's the book update. We're finished the October chapter, which is exciting. And then three more chapters to go. And then, it'll be eventually done. You will be happy to know that me and my husband have booked a vacation for the first week of January because I'm giving myself January as like buffer month. So I'm going to have the book fully done by end of December. We'll see because of course I forgot about Christmas and I go away to Vancouver for 2 weeks as if I'm going to be writing there. I don't know. But anyways, I gave myself January as a buffer because it's good to not just work myself right to the deadline and freak out and have some regrets about wish I had more time. But me and my husband have booked a Mexico vacation first week of January. And I'm very excited because we go on some like little, trips here and there, but definitely this year, this is year. I'm like, what year is it? It's 2023. This year it is, no, we haven't gone on vacation because, the world is expensive as hell. And we bought an expensive house with an expensive mortgage. And so this is where we vacation in our basement because that is the choice that we made and we have to live with it because we're adults. But no, in any case, we did book a vacation and I'm very excited. We deserve it. That's what we're telling ourselves. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I feel like that's the only update I have for you at the minute, but thank you so much for listening. A little teaser for who I have on the show next week. I have Peter Atwater, who is the author of the book, The Confidence Map. He is a behavioral finance expert. So if you're into behavioral finance, which who isn't these days? I mean, I absolutely am obsessed with it. And yes, there's going to be a chapter in my book all about it. Yeah, you're going to want to tune in next week with Peter Atwater. It's going to be great. But yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. Also, I should remind you, I've got a YouTube channel under my name, Jessica Morehouse. And also, please follow me on Instagram if you're not already. I am at Jessica I Morehouse. I'm also on Threads. Find me there. I'm trying. I honestly have it on my little to-do list every day to thread at least once a day and also put out an Instagram reel to keep myself accountable because, I'm not natural with these kinds of things. I don't love it. Force myself to do it. And what's the other things that I've got? I've got Instagram. Oh yeah, there's also an Instagram for the podcast. If you just want to have like a weekly notification, basically, it's like, hey, there's a new episode. That's a great way to do that at More Money Podcast. And Twitter is dead to me. I'm not into X. I'm not into what's going on over there and what's happening. I don't like it. It is a dumpster fire, and I don't want to participate. So, but I am on Twitter if you want to find me. But, I think after Elon got rid of my blue check mark, which I earned and I had for like 7 years, and he asked me to pay for it, I'm like, absolutely not. I'm not going to pay for something like that. And I do not pay for my Instagram, what's it called? Verification. Yeah. I'm just like not into it. So that's what's going on there. Nothing, a whole lot of nothing. But yeah, anyways, that is it for me. Thank you so much to my wonderful podcast editor, Matt Rideout. And yeah, I will see you back here next Wednesday with a fresh new episode of the More Money Podcast. See you then.